Okay, so the rings are in. I decided to add a little bit to this. Just installing the piston in that first cylinder. So, I've got my new bearing in. And again, I use Stay Lube, engine assembly lube. Okay, you put a good coating on the inside. Make sure it's lubricated nice and good. I can't emphasize this enough when you're dealing with bearings. Don't use your bare hands, because you could get the grease from your fingers on the bearing, and it could create a spot that the grease and the oil doesn't adhere to, and then you'll get a hot spot and you'll burn your bearing out. That's how it happens, right? So use gloves, use a liberal amount of lube on there. You have to wipe things down. I've said this before, lint-free rags. You can buy them by the bag full. It's the only thing I use when working on engines, because you don't want lint. I've already wiped out the cylinder and got everything all cleaned up, so it's all ready to go. I've rotated the engine so that, maybe I can show this to you real quick. I don't know if it'll get in there or not. I've rotated the engine so that the crankshaft is in the center of the hole, okay? So that when I guide this down, I know where it's at and what it is that I have to aim for, okay? So I've got my two pieces of, this is just fuel injection line, obviously not for this engine, but just two pieces of rubber hose, because I want to protect the surface of the crankshaft. And hose is generally on a loop, so if you notice that these loop outwards, that'll help it to keep from getting caught up on the crankshaft. So I've got my ring retainer put on already, and when you look at your piston, you got to know the front to the rear. Remember the notch from earlier, so that's going to go to the front of the engine, so it's going to turn this way. So when you go to put this in, you're going to do it very gently. You're going to line it up. You're going to get it set in. Got your mark to the front. And everything's right about where it needs to be. The back side is lined up pretty close. Don't use a metal hammer. Use a rubber mallet. Don't use a rubber mallet end. Use the handle side. You can use other things. I'm just kind of particular about stuff like that, because all you're going to do is tap this in very gently, very slowly, because you still have to line up. Okay, so that's on. Another reason you use the handle end. You can grab that when it's off. Okay, the piston's in. Okay, we're just going to keep tapping, guiding the other end with our hand. Right down the middle. So I will take a quick second and spin this over. The whole engine here, so that we can take a look at how this one went in. Okay, so let's get it to about right there. Put my pin back in. Okay, so here it is. This piston is in. The rubber that goes over the bolts has protected the crankshaft. Okay, so bearing is still seated right where it should be, and then we're going to put the bearing cap on, because we're going to rotate the crank. So for each one of these, don't just leave it sit and then crank, go to your next one, and just continue to turn your crank, because these are only going to go one way. So once they start going back down, the piston's going to stay up because there's nothing to pull it back down. So take care of the bearing. And I know I'm doing this off camera here, I'm sorry, I'm cleaning everything up with you know, with a lint-free rag. Not that anything's going to ride there, because it's not, but you know, you want everything cleaned up, you don't want anything in the way. You got to put the tang, there's a tang groove here, there's a groove here, there's the tang here actually, say that correctly. And then you put this in, okay, don't drop it. I usually do this over my bench, but I'm not over there right now, so I'm trying to do it in front of the camera for you. And get it so that it's lined up right where it needs to go. Now, once it's in, like I said, you want to use a liberal amount of engine lube. Okay, 1 second and I'll be right back over there. Okay, so a liberal amount of engine lube. And get that bearing coated real good. And again, no grease from my finger is on there. Don't want any spots of that. Okay, tang is lined up, everything's there. Now I'm only going to I'm just going to put this on. I'm not going to I'm not going to torque it down just yet. Okay, for this I do use a rubber hammer. I'm not going to torque it down yet because I don't know the torque. Otherwise I would. So get your nuts. Okay, we're going to get that started. Get this all tightened up on here. Okay. Now we haven't put the timing chain on yet. We still got to time, you know, do that to the camshaft and stuff. Right now we're just putting it on there so that it rotates when I turn the engine. Now this is something I've always done. It gives me peace of mind knowing nothing's bound up. Every time I put one in, every time I put a piston in, I crank this over. I can feel everything is nice and smooth. Okay. I can hear the wiper and the rings right where they're supposed to be. They're oiled. Everything's good. Nice and smooth. So that's installing the piston, really from piston ring all the way to installing the piston. Yeah, I think that's it. I'm just going to go through and I'm actually going to do all my pistons. I'm going to build all my pistons first. I lay mine all out so I know where everything goes once I measure, mark, and do all that stuff. And then I'm just going to go through and put them in all in at one time. I might record that and just fast forward through and let you watch it, but we'll see how it goes. Thanks for watching.